Hey friends, in today's video I have 2 summer farmhouse inspired DIYs and I think you're going to love them. So let's jump right on in to the first DIY. For this DIY, you're going to need a tray. This one I found this year at the Dollar Tree in some of their summer decor, but any tray of this shape will work. You will also need a chess set found at the Dollar Tree, and we're going to use this for the legs of our tray. You're going to need a placemat. This one from the Dollar Tree, but whatever placemat you have on hand will work as well. And then this stencil pack from Folk Art and some spray paint. Or you can use chalk paint if you don't have spray paint on hand. And then you're going to need black chalk paint, a glue gun, paint brushes, stencil brushes, and a utility or X-Acto knife, a ruler, and some glue sticks, preferably Gorilla Glue sticks. Now we're going to get started by cutting our placemat. We're going to use this for the handle on our tray. So I want to flip it over, and I'm using my ruler as a straight edge. Now this placemat has rounded corners, and so I want to cut those off so that the ends of our handle are nice and straight. So to do this, I'm using my ruler and an X-Acto knife, or actually I'm using a utility knife, but you can use whatever your preference is. We're just going to use that to cut that piece off, and then we will cut our handles. Now my handle is going to be about the width of my ruler, which I measured is right at 1 inch. So the handle will need to be around 1 inch wide. Now I'm trimming this up here a little bit because I'm not really good at cutting straight with this utility knife, so I had to trim it up with some scissors. But you're going to need 2 pieces for your handle. Now, going back on this, I think 1 piece would work just fine, especially if you used the thinner, harder, more plastic type of placemat. But you want to take them outside or in a good ventilated area and give them 2 coats of spray paint. You also want to do the same for your tray. Now, we're going to start by putting our handle together. And what I'm going to do is use some hot glue and glue the 2 pieces together. Now you want the 2 pieces that you spray painted facing outward and gluing the other 2 together. Now I have to be honest, I really struggled with this handle. It was terrible. So I began by just putting some glue on there and laying it flat on the table and gluing it together. Then when I tried to bend it to create the handle, it buckled up, came apart, and was a mess. So I took it apart, and then I started in the center of the handle and started gluing a little bit at a time. And as I glued and the hot glue kind of set up, I bent the handle. Or the placemats to create kind of a curve. I hope that makes sense, but this was the only way that I could get it not to buckle and come apart. But now the bottom of your handle is going to end up being a little bit uneven. You can cut that part off if you want, but it will be tucked underneath the lip of the tray when it's all said and done, and you won't see that anyway. Then I went down the other side and did the exact same thing, kind of creating that curve as I went down each side. Now, this is what it's going to look like. So you're going to go crossways on this tray, and you can see there that handle is plenty long enough, and I think it's going to work just fine. But before we glue it on, we want to use our stencil and get that on the tray before putting it on. So I'm using this Folk Art pack that you can pick up on Amazon, and sometimes I see them in Walmart as well. but I will try to link it down below if I can find it. But it has so many different options. You can create so many good things on here. So these are a good option for people who don't necessarily have a Cricut machine or some type of cutting machine. Now they come in almost like a poster board type material, and they have the perforated parts on it that you kind of have to pop out in order to reveal the stencil. And so you can customize this. You can pop out certain parts if you want and leave others in there if you want. But I'm going to show you here how easy it is just to pop those out. Now it does take a few minutes to do this if you have a fairly detailed stencil, but it's very easy, and you come out in just little pieces just like that. Now next, you're going to want to cut down the stencil to fit inside the tray. You can see here I'm doing that. Now you want to save those corners because they do have some other things that you can use for future stencils. So I'm cutting it down so that it will lay as flat as possible inside the tray. And then I'm going to take some painter's tape and tape down the edges so that it doesn't move while I'm trying to paint. And I'm using painter's tape, and that's what I would suggest so that you don't risk pulling off the white spray paint on the tray. So I love using these flat sponge brushes from the Dollar Tree. They work great for stenciling, and they're very inexpensive. And I also like to use chalk paint when I am stenciling because it doesn't seem to bleed as much. And I think it's because it's a thicker consistency and just stays in place. The other good thing about it is that it dries really quickly. And so the turnaround time is a lot faster than using some other paints before you can remove the stencil. So I just go around and do a thin coat over all of the parts that are exposed that I want to see on my tray. Now I'm doing a thin coat on here because the heavier the coat, the more likely it is to bleed. So if you want something that is more full coverage, you may need to do more than one coat on there or do some touch up in areas that don't quite cover as well as you would like. But for this particular DIY, I'm going for that rustic farmhouse look, and so I did not want full coverage. So now you can see I have completed the stencil, and I'm going to carefully remove the tape so that I don't pull off any of my white paint to reveal the stencil. And I think it turned out perfectly. I love how that looks, and I love that it says produce. It reminds me of summer, which is what we're going for. So now we want to give this tray that enamel look, and so to do that I want to take some more of that black Waverly paint, go around the edges of the entire tray. Now in certain places I choose to make that black line a little thicker than others, kind of come in at sort of a rounded shape. Now what this does is on a real enamel tray, the black that is revealed is because the white enamel has worn off, and that is very popular in farmhouse decor. And so what you want to do is create what would look natural as far as the wear and tear on the enamel tray. And so some places are going to be more worn than others. Then we're going to go back along the edges that again would be naturally worn and put some more black paint there to appear like the white enamel has worn away as well. And I just do this in a few places along the edges of the tray. You will also want to do the same thing to your handle. Now, all I did was go around each edge of the handle. You can see here, I did that, and then I did it, of course, on the other side. Now it's time to glue on the feet, and you, of course, want to do this before you glue on the handle as well. So for this, we're using this chess game of all things from the Dollar Tree, and they come already black or white, and I chose to use the black for the feet of my tray. You want to just twist those off turn your tray over, use a little bit of hot glue on each one of the chest pieces on the largest part, and glue that to the bottom of the tray. Now this tray makes it very easy because it already has perfect little corners that your feet will fit into. Now once that has set up, you're going to turn it back over and glue on the handle. To do this, I kind of find the center. Now certainly you can measure this and find the exact center if you want to do that, but honestly I just eyeballed it on this one, and I just used a strip of hot glue on the very end and tucked it under the lip of the tray and kind of bent the placemat or the handle upwards along the edge of the tray to kind of so it would stand up straight. And then I repeated that same thing on the other side. Once that is glued on, this project is finished. I think this will be great to add to anyone's summer decor. Now, before we move on to the next DIY, I want to send out a big thank you to Heidi Sonboul over at Heidi Sonboul DIY. She asked me to be part of her summer DIY series where she is spotlighting newer channels. And I am so excited to be part of this summer series. You guys, she is so sweet and I have really enjoyed working with her. So if you haven't been over to check out her channel, you must, because she has so many videos and tons of DIY inspiration that I know you will love. Now, if you are new coming over from her channel, I want to welcome you and let you know how thankful I am that you are here, and I hope that you will stick around for future videos. I am still really new at this and trying to grow my channel. I have so many ideas, especially for the upcoming seasons, and I know you guys will love it. So definitely hit that subscribe button before you end this video, because I have tons of tutorials, DIYs, decorating, hauls, and so much more that I think you guys will really enjoy. So now, let's move on to the next DIY. I found my inspiration on Pinterest, and these two lanterns are from the Home Depot, and the set of two cost $99. And I wanted to recreate them, and you guys are not going to believe what I made them from. So a few products from the Dollar Tree, a little bit of elbow grease, and we're going to create something absolutely amazing. And for this DIY, we're going to need one sheet of the foam board from the Dollar Tree and a few things of paint. So we're going to need Waverly wax, antique wax, and then we're going to need Waverly and the color Mineral. And then I'm going to be using this tempera paint, I think is how you say it, and it's from the Dollar Tree. So I'll show you what we're going to do with that later on. You're also going to need a couple of types of brushes. You're going to need a sponge brush and a chip brush. And you're also probably, I don't show you here, but you're going to need a smaller brush as well, like an artist type brush. And you'll see why later. You're also going to want a glue gun and some glue sticks. You're going to need some type of wooden bead. I actually thought I would use one of these and ended up using something slightly different, but it is wood. Now, you're going to want to start with some cardstock or poster board, whatever it is that you have on hand. To create this lantern, I am going to use cardstock and to cut out these circles that you see here, as well as the two straight pieces. Now, I used my Cricut to do this, and I realize not everyone has a Cricut. So there are several ways you can go about this. Now, you can use a protractor or create one on your own. And you can do that using a pencil. Certainly look that up on YouTube. There are videos on that. If you don't have either one of those things, find something in your home that are these dimensions that is round that you can use as a guide for circles. Now, what I'm showing you here are the dimensions of these circles, and I'm going to give these to you, but no worries, don't need to write it down. I will post it in the bottom in the description box. The green circle is going to be the base of the lantern, and it is 6 inches. Now, we're going to layer these to create some more sturdy pieces. So the larger circle that you see there, the ring, it is also 6 inches, and the inner circle is 4 inches. And then the smaller circle is 5.5 inches with a 4-inch center ring as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to layer these, and that smaller ring is going to sandwich in between the others. Okay, and I'm going to show you this in greater detail in just a few minutes because I know that seems a bit confusing. But what this is going to do is two things. It's going to create a much sturdier piece for your lantern, and it's also going to create, by sandwiching these, there's going to be a groove in there that we can place our beads into so that we have that beaded look. Now I have created some other things in the past with these beads, and it sits directly on top, and they tend to want to fall off or get knocked off because I've used hot glue or whatnot. Well, this one is not going to do that, and it's going to be super sturdy, and I think you guys are really going to like it. Now the straight pieces are 10 inches long, one is 1 inch, and the other is 3/4 of an inch wide. So now you're going to trace these onto your foam board as the next step. So here I lay these out, and you're only going to need one of the solid ones because that is going to go on the bottom. But for your larger rings, you're going to need 5 of those. The smaller rings, you're going to need 3 of them. And then the long straight piece, or the larger straight piece, excuse me, the wider one that's 1 inch wide, you're going to need 8 of those. And then the more narrow straight piece, you're going to need 4 of those. Now, once I get through tracing these onto my foam board, you can see if you strategically do it, you will not need more than 1 piece of foam board. But I bought an extra just in case I messed up. Then I took my X-Acto knife or a utility knife. Actually, I took my utility knife. Whichever you prefer will work. I am better with the utility knife for whatever reason. And then I used my cardstock circles as a guide when I was cutting so that I could get a little bit smoother smoother circle, right? Those utility knives can be a bit tricky to stay on track, at least for me anyways. You may be better at it than I am. But I'm not going to lie, you guys, this is not a quick DIY. So it took me about 45 to 50 minutes to cut all of these circles out. It's not difficult, it's just a bit time consuming, but the end result is so worth it, and I think you guys are going to love it. So you can see here I pulled out an old cutting board from another craft tool that I have to use to protect my table. So now you can see here I have them all cut out, and those are the larger ones and the smaller ones. There is the base, and then we have all of these circles left that we're not going to use for this project. Don't throw those away. I have used those over and over for other projects since I made this, and I think you guys will find uses for them as well. So now I'm going to show you how we are going to stack this up. So you want to start, this will be on your base, then you want to layer that smaller one in between the base and one of the larger circles. Now what you do, if you line up the 2 inner circles on those 2 pieces, then it creates a groove on the edge. I'm going to show you that hopefully a little bit closer up, and maybe you guys can see. And then what this does is it creates a place for us to put our beads in. Once we get this all glued together, it's going to be so sturdy, and then when you hot glue those beads in there, they are not going anywhere. So hopefully you guys can see this here and it makes a little bit more sense. So we're going to do that for all of the pieces on here. But before we glue them together, I noticed I had some rough edges, and I took one of Dollar Tree's sanding sponges and just sanded the edges lightly to remove any jagged pieces or loose pieces of styrofoam from inside the foam board. So once that's completed, ready to glue things together. So I'm starting here, and I'm putting the glue towards the inner part of the circles so that they line up properly, and then I am going to glue that to the base. So now we have that piece, and then I continue that with all of my circles. So the base is the only one that has a solid one, and then the others are going to create these rings, and that will be the top part of the lantern. I hope that makes sense. Now, once you have all of these circles completed, you will do the same thing for the long pieces. Now, these are going to be the supports, what makes this lantern tall. Now, to create that same type of groove for these pieces, because they will have beads as well, I'm going to take the wider piece, and then a smaller piece, and glue those together and line up the inner edge to be even. And I did that by placing it on the table as a guide of how to make sure that they were all even. And then what that does, when you sandwich that smaller piece, it creates this groove. I hope you guys can see that. And then we will be gluing it to the base. And now you can maybe hopefully see how that's coming together. So we'll repeat this process, and when we are finished, we will have 4 really solid straight pieces for our lantern. Now it's time to assemble the lantern. Now what you want to do is you want to place or space these 4 long pieces evenly around the base. So I start on one side, and then I'm going to come directly across from it and glue the other one so that they are even. I hope that makes sense. And then directly in between them, I will do the other 2 straight pieces. Now, when you're gluing these, make sure the groove is to the outside edge and the even side is to the inside. And that way, your beads will be on the outside of your lantern. Then we're going to glue on the top round ring, adhering it to all 4 of the straight sides. Now make sure you can see there I have one that is a bit crooked, so when I go to glue it, I straighten it up. So make sure that you are straightening up your pieces so that you don't have one that is tilting one way or the other. And this is really fairly simple to do, and it is really solid once that glue dries. So now what we want to do is create that top piece, and to do that we're going to have to cut one of these circles or these rings in half, okay? And I'll show you why here in just a second. You want to create an arch that will go over the top of the lantern, and that will give it that rounded edge on the very top of the lantern. So I'm cutting those directly in half, and then I'm going to glue it. Now here's where I went wrong, so don't do like me. So I just got so excited about gluing that on there, I didn't even bother to line it up with the straight pieces underneath it. So what you want to do is create the illusion that it is one seamless piece that is coming up and over the top of the lantern. But I just glued mine on there any old way, and it ended up being fine. I removed it and then aligned it back up, and it worked out fine. Next, we want to create the other 2 pieces, the rounded pieces for the top. And to do this, we want to find the center of the other half of our circle that we had just cut in half and cut that in half again. And what we're going to do is we're going to line it up with the other 2 vertical pieces on our lantern and glue it to the circle, the half circle and the solid circle. I hope that makes sense, and you guys will see this here in just a second. I apologize that it's out of frame. This ended up being so tall that it was really hard to keep it in frame. Well, you can see here I have removed that. It did rip the paper a little bit, but I was able to fix it and you could not tell. So make sure you're lining that up as I'm showing you right here so that it looks like one seamless piece, and you're going to want to make sure you do that with all the pieces that go on the top. Now you can see there I had it all lined up. Now these are the beads that I'm using, and I think you have a couple of options. Of course you could use wood beads, but I didn't have enough that were small enough to go in there. And then I really wanted to use Mardi Gras beads, the really small ones. Dollar Tree typically has those. Well, they were out of them that day, and I'm actually kind of glad. You can see here, I do have these, but they're way too large and won't go in. But I think that is a good option if you have some on hand or if you find them at the Dollar Tree. But my Dollar Tree has these new beads, and they're gold. They have some silver ones as well, but they're round, but they have flat sides, so it works perfectly for fitting inside these grooves. And to do this, all I am doing is sticking some hot glue down in that groove and then placing the bead in there. And it is so secure. Honestly, you probably could do without the hot glue and they would stay because it's pretty snug, but I wanted to make sure that they were very secure and that none of them would fall out. Now I'm going to continue this over the entire piece anywhere we have a groove. So on those vertical pieces, all of the rounded pieces will all get the beads to the outside. Now, one more thing you want to be cautious of, when you're placing your beads in the groove, you want to make sure that all of the beads are placed the same distance to the outside. So you don't want any sticking up further than others. And you can see here what it looks like when the entire thing has beads. Now, at this point, I think it looks like something that stepped out of Vegas in the 1980s. It is pretty gaudy, but when we get finished, you will not see any of this gold, and it's going to look like wood. Next, we're going to be creating the piece for the very top of the lantern. And what I'm using here is a wooden doll head from Hobby Lobby. They come in a pack of 4, and I had one left over, and I liked the size of it versus the beads that I had, so I decided to use it. And I also liked that it had that flat part on the bottom there. So I'm going to take a few of these beads and glue them around the edge of the flat part of this wooden bead. And this is just going to create a little more visual interest and just look a little bit more finished and polished. I'm just taking some wood glue and going around the edge, and I think it holds, I think it was 5 beads there. And you'll see it close up here in just a second. Now, once you get those on there and they are set up, then you can place some glue on them and adhere it to the top of the lantern. You may have to hold it in place while it sets up so that it adheres well. Now, next is time to paint, and I used the Waverly chalk paint in the color Mineral, and I gave the entire thing one coat and then went back and touched up some of the golden beads so that they were completely covered. Now, I'm going to go in next with this burnt umber color from Folk Art, and we're going to dry brush this color all over the entire piece. Now, and it's just going to be a really light brushing, and I am using one of these chip brushes from the Dollar Tree, and this chip brush is great for dry brushing and creating distressed look. But in this particular case, we are creating wood grain. You can't see it real well on camera, but in person it really starts to kind of come together at this point. But once we do the next step after this is when the magic really happens and this begins to look like wood. But you're going to dry brush this burnt umber color over the entire thing. Now, in some of these harder to reach places on the inside, I had to switch to a I guess like a painter's artist type brush just because I couldn't get that other brush in there. So now I'm going to take the Waverly Antique Wax and I'm going to dip a paper towel in it and rub it all over the entire surface of the lantern. Now again, this is where the magic happens. Once you apply this, for whatever reason, it starts to look like wood. And you could stop here and not take that last step that we will do here in a second. But this is pretty quick process. It dries fairly quickly. I think I waited maybe 20 or 30 minutes after applying all of this all over before I completed the next step. Now we are on the final step of this project, and I wanted to create that really weathered beach look kind of wood, maybe like a driftwood kind of feel, but I see that a lot with these beaded pieces, whether they're lanterns, risers, or whatever, that they almost have that really whitewashed effect, and so I wanted to create that on here. I think it really added to how summery this piece feels. And so for that, I'm using this Prang brand, I guess is how you say it, and it is from the Dollar Tree. Now, this paint is really different, and when I first started using it, I hated it. It's like it has no pigment. It's terrible. But if you want to whitewash something, it is perfect. Now, it will dry a little more opaque than it does in the beginning and have a little bit more pigment. So you may want to, once you brush this on, you may want to take a paper towel and wipe some of the excess off. And it just gives it the nicest effect. Now, I'm using a paintbrush for this rather than a foam brush, and that works a little bit better on these beads to get that paint down in there. It really makes them stand out, and I think it just takes this piece to the next level. You could certainly leave this out if this is not your taste and you wanted it to have a darker appearance. Just stop at the last step and don't do this part. But for me, I thought it made it look very beachy and summery and just perfect with the other wood tones I have going on in my home. Well, that wraps up this DIY. I absolutely love how this turned out. I think it looks so high-end, and who knew we could make this from some Dollar Tree foam board. I also love the tray that we created today using some stencils and some Dollar Tree products. I'm also really excited that you guys are still here and you joined my channel today. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you will give it a big thumbs up, and be sure and check out all of the links down below over to Heidi's channel, as well as some other items in the description that I think you guys might be interested in. I hope you'll consider subscribing so that I can catch you in the next video. Until then, bye!